be speaking today about location, about concept, about operating flexibility in times like this. And the first question that I want to ask is coming after I read you a little narrative from a horror movie. Rising inflation, difficult political stances, rising cost of utilities, lack of operating staff after COVID pandemic. I think realistically it's making very difficult for operators and for hotel developers to create economically viable hotel product. So Andrea, if I may ask you, basically, is there any concept that comes as a winner? Well, I mean, it's hard to say a winner, but is there a concept that is most resilient in times like this, in economic turmoil that we're living through?
Yeah, well, I think the winners, or those that are most resilient, are probably the ones that focus more on cost efficiency, like limited service products, budget economy, mid-scale products, digital products, also concepts focusing on spatial efficiency and multifunctional spaces. So, for example, that's something we did in the course of our brand refresh. Maybe also for the audience, a little bit of a background. Choice Hotels has been going through a whole company transformation where we've done some market research on how do our brands have to look like in the future and what are the needs of the guests. And based on that, we've refreshed all our brands in the EMEA market. And one of these brands, Comfort Hotels, one of its hallmarks, for example, is the Comfort Hub, which is a multifunctional social hub that combines lobby with reception, with breakfast area, with co-working, so all those different kind of functions. And obviously, on the one hand, this increases spatial efficiency, and I think this is also something very important nowadays, that you have to focus more on revenue per square meter rather than only revenue per room, because space is expensive, of course. And then on the other hand, it also increases staff efficiency, because obviously the guy that's checking in the guest can also serve the drinks, etc. So this is how we tackle it a little bit. And then one other trend we see, or a winner in general, are probably the brands. Because we see that individual hotels nowadays are more open towards joining brands, be it via management or franchise agreement or something, because they are, because they see the necessity to realize the synergies and the cost efficiencies they have through brands, be it via OTA commissions or sales and marketing, procurement services, all those things. So yeah, if there are any winners, then I think it's limited service concepts, like our Comfort brand, digital concepts like those, Lime Homes, Numas out there that are completely staffless, but obviously that's also a niche that not all hotels in the future will be staffless, right? But okay. I think these are the winners, mostly.
If I kind of improvise a bit, and what is your take on, let's say, because the winners seem to be what you've just described, right? About economy and the ones that have optimization of space, etc. What would you say, Mike, about Lux segment? How does Lux segment come out of the times like that?
There is a school of thought that luxury is very resilient. We've seen huge rates this last summer. But I'm not going to steal Dan Wakefield's thunder. He's on this afternoon. He heads up our luxury and lifestyle development, so he's more appropriate to address that question. But I agree with Andrea. I think focus service is very much more resilient in times of downturn. Okay.
Well, I mean, perhaps staying on the concept part of our discussion, Max, during the crisis, you, as Louvre Hotels, as well as your ultimate owner, Xinjiang, have moved into innovation activity, and as a result, were awarded a hospitality award in 2021 for coming up with concepts such as Hosho and FitUp. I mean, these are specific examples which are coming out of recent turmoil, right? And it would be very interesting to hear your thoughts and kind of the behind the scenes of what has been happening and why these brands came out.
Yeah, I mean, these two concepts were were started before the crisis. So this is something that there were projects already on the pipeline, and we were able to fully develop them during the crisis, which is an interesting time to come up with a concept of selling by the bed rather than a full room, which is what Osho is. But it's a little bit what Andrea said, it's the maximizing revenue per square meter. So it's opportunities to bring out a premium. Osho, as I said, it's really leveraging on our premier class network, which is the economy segment, and having more flexibility to sell rooms by the bed. So it's not a fully hostel concept, but it's more of a hybrid concept, which allows us more flexibility and really to maximize that revenue per square meter. And Fit Up was also the same sort of idea, no? How can we add, number one, service to the client, to meet the demand of the clients, but also to add revenue for our investors. So most of our mid-scale hotels, they don't have room for a fitness room. So how do we bring that experience into the rooms? And that's, we partnered with Decathlon to put a system together, and we started that, again, during the pandemic, which actually worked out quite well. And we have quite an interesting premium on that concept when we sell the rooms.
Okay.
So it's trying to keep up the innovation constantly.
Interesting. So basically, I'm going to switch very soon to you, Nico, but we have 3 representatives of global hotel chains from operating part, and you all sort of agree on the winners or the most resilient concept and segmentation within that comes out of the pandemic and turmoil. Okay. Good. It's good to come to some unanimous conclusion. So anyway, so I think one thing, we have quite a bit of time ahead of us. So if there's any question in the audience, please raise your hand. There will be someone coming up to you with a microphone. So please feel free to raise your hand, and at some point we'll get stopped and answer the questions. We have Nico Horky from Advanced Hotel Partners, who used to work at Principal, who comes from basically an investment, let's say, fund background. So it's going to be interesting to hear your thought on the following question, which is shifting a bit from concept to flexibility. You speak to a lot of operators, right? That's part of...
I do on a regular basis, yeah.
That's part of...
Each and every project we work on, we talk to operators and get offers from them.
What, and it's funny that you probably speak to these gentlemen and ladies here as well. So what is the flexibility that you demand from operators, especially after COVID?
Well, you'll probably smile. I mean, what we saw from the crisis is that most of the burden was on operators. Basically, the business we're in is to buy properties and to lease them out. So when the crisis hit, all the burden was on our operators, and one of the challenges was to find a solution to navigate through the crisis and work with the operators and see exactly how they can pay the rent. And since they were paying rent and we were just cashing in, most of the risk was on their side. So actually the flexibility had to come more from us to find creative solutions to make sure that we navigate through the crisis together and make sure that we don't take over the property. They can't pay the rent, we terminate the contract, and we take over the property. So actually, if you're asking me today what I'd be asking from operators, is to make sure that we kind of stick to the conditions we had pre-COVID, but at the same time we try to find creative solution to navigate through any potential upcoming crisis, and that could be, let's say, another COVID-19 crisis, whereby we can, well, I'm getting actually, I got feedback from different operators, so I'm picking different ideas, would be to have a certain period of time where you, for instance, turn GOP, well, we work with hybrid leases, whereby we have a minimum guaranteed rent and a turnover rent component. So normally, just to explain, the tenant will pay each and every month that minimum guaranteed rent, and the turnover rent percentage is based basically on the performance of the assets. What would happen in times of crisis is that the operator struggles, and we turn into a GOP rent mechanism, whereby if they're GOP positive, they pay a rent, but if they turn GOP negative, they don't pay any rent. So it's some kind of rent-free period that would have to navigate through the crisis, and the minute they turn GOP positive again, they start paying a rent again, and the minute we go back to, let's say, normal, of course there's plenty of criteria and mechanism you can put in place, we go back to our good old structure where we have a minimum guaranteed rent and a turnover rent component. So to be honest, actually, I can't ask much more flexibility on the tenant side. I think the flexibility has to come from both sides. We have to find creative solutions to work hand in hand. And one thing we always say when we work with such structure, where we have a minimum guaranteed rent and turnover rent, is that we want, as owners, the security of getting a minimum guaranteed rent, and we want to get all the benefits of improved performance. But if we say that we want to work hand in hand with operators, then we also have to share the risk. And it seems to me that before, maybe there was a lot of risk on the operator side, slightly less on the landlord. So we have to be more creative on our side. So if I would demand something basically from operators, is to make sure that we can stick to the old principles, but tweaking, let's say, a bit of flexibility as far as crises are concerned.
Yeah. You just lost half of the audience with the pace.
Yeah, exactly. I was about, yeah.
But no, that's clear. I think the only question I would probably ask here to wrap up is, if before you expected, let's say, 60-70% rent to EBITDA coverage, is that or I mean, in the region we're in, it's perhaps a bit different from Western markets, but is that the same you would expect today, or you want your rent to be even lower?
Yeah, no, I would make sure that my rental coverage is still healthy, because I know that if the rental coverage is too low, then I might at some time will have an issue with my operator, who will tell me, okay, I can't pay the rent, what shall we do? So I just make sure that I get maybe an even healthier rental coverage now, and I keep in mind that mechanism I just mentioned, whereby I know that if they can't pay the rent, they will not pay the rent for a certain period of time. But this has to be only temporary, of course. So,
yep.
And this, I mean, I talked to several operators actually before coming to this panel to make sure I can come up with different solutions. There's another operator that mentioned as well, is that if we go GOP negative, we don't pay any rent for a certain month and we just defer the payment. Once business is back to normal, we will repay whatever was not paid during that 3, 6, 9 month period. So actually, they will end up paying it, but slightly later when they can afford to do that.
Yep.
At the end of the day, you want to make sure that your operator is making money. Otherwise, it's not a business relationship. It's a win-win situation. If it doesn't work like that, at some point, the operator will go back to you and say either we need to terminate the contract or let's find other solutions to work together. So.
And hopefully these are months, as you say, because
yeah, exactly.
you always refer to months,
if
because sometimes it can go
sometimes
into years.
It can be longer. In that, well, with COVID-19, it was actually quite long. So
exactly. Well, staying maybe on flexibility, Mike, you've signed, I mean, plenty of HMA management contracts, franchise contracts before COVID, during COVID, and after COVID. So how is Hilton when it comes to flexibility with contractual obligations today? And if they're more flexible, that would be great to hear for the audience, perhaps, and for us.
Contract flexibility, just the sort of subject you want to whet your appetite before lunch.
Exactly.
So, look, we operate two very clear, transparent, but distinct business models. That's the management agreement, which we re-engineered into the branding and management agreement, and I'll talk about that more in a moment, and franchise license agreement. And we've successfully grown the portfolio. We've tripled the European estate in the last 15 years using those models. We took the decision, it's about 8 years ago, that we felt to grow at scale, we needed to be easier to do business with. We want to be more owner aligned. So we reinvented the management agreement to the branding and management agreement. That wasn't in isolation. So we brought in the industry, institutional owners, high net worth owners, consultants, asset managers, lawyers, and we sat around the table, and over the course of a year, we really talked about what was important, what was really necessary to arrive at a more simplified and refined document. So we reduced our document by about a third. We took out all those Roman numeral clauses. We made it easy to read. We took out all the legal mumbo-jumbo. And worked on all those clauses that you spend time, infinite time, discussing, the micro controls, the performance clauses, etc. So I think that was our big move. What we have seen is a significant increase in franchising, and we operate a very successful franchise model. Flexibility, we've seen where there's a genuine need now to take on your business direct. You know, we're incorporating the flexibility to flip after a certain period of time from a management to a franchise model. But other than working on core commercial terms, you know, our agreements are pretty consistent. And I think to be a successful franchisor, you need to maintain that consistency and transparency so that it's successful.
Is there a bigger demand now than there was before when it comes to franchise agreements?
There's a lot of talk about franchising or franchise agreements, and I think if we did a survey in this room, we'd have 20 different definitions.
So give us your definition.
I don't have one because it's not a model we offer. No,
Okay.
We try and stay clear of that. Yeah.
It's either or.
And I say we operate two distinct models very successfully, and that's where I think the long-term value is.
Okay.
And in the end, I think franchising is already the definition of flexibility, right? So if you make revenue, you pay your fees. If you don't make revenue because there's a crisis, you don't pay any fees. So I think that's also a reason why franchising is on such a rise.
Well, maybe I can. I work with a lot of owners who commission us to help bring operators, right? And when it comes to leases, it's very clear, right? They want a lease, and then we can talk about hybrid, we can talk about fixed, but typically it's fixed with hybrid, etc. But when it comes to management of franchise, I hear a lot of more flexibility. People demand for more, like, I want an option to switch in 5 years' time. I want an option to, so they feel like they want to have options for the future whenever they sell, whenever they transact, whatever. So, I mean, for whatever reasons, they just want to have flexibility to switch between the franchise and management and demand brands basically to go ahead or along with them. But anyway, so anything to add on your side, Max, on flexibility?
Well, look, I mean, we're also very different. At Yin Yang level, we have over 10,000 hotels around the world. I think we have every single kind of agreement that you can think of, from affiliation, franchise, management, hybrid agreements, leases. We even own about 20% of our portfolio at Louvre level. So we really, and I'm still surprising myself seeing new kind of agreements that we're coming up with. So yeah, I think at this point in time, coming out of this crisis, facing all the difficulties we see with inflation and war in Europe and everything, we need to really maintain that flexibility. And again, we're innovating also in the contract types and the kind of deals we can do with our partners.
Okay. Thank you, Max. Any questions so far? There is a question here, if we could please navigate the microphone.
Yes, my name is Scott Antel. I'm a lawyer. Mike, I would give Hilton credit with your conversion to this BAMA management contract, which you reduced substantially, made more customer-friendly and the like. The downside is that these condensed contracts don't really very clearly say what the operator's going to do, particularly when it comes to what they're going to provide in the annual budget, what levels of reporting they're going to provide at the end of the year, on the employment scale. So there's generally, most lawyers don't say this, but I would often say that less is more. But there is a problem of reducing the contracts too much. And then the other comment I say, I think the move to franchise is really addressing owners getting more control, particularly today, over costs, and the ability to control that better than the brands would do, as well as the inability, I think, of the brands to really source good key people, GMs, financial directors, particularly in less attractive locations. And I work a lot in emerging markets. I mean, finding good GMs in the African markets or the CIS markets, very difficult. Whereas if you're franchising, a local owner or a third-party manager can identify local people who have experience with brands. And if you've run a Radisson, you can probably run a Hilton, you can probably run a Marriott. And they can get people who have better local expertise and greater commitment to the market. And also manage the costs better.
Thank you. Was it more like a kind of common statement, or you want to?
A little of both, but I would welcome
yeah,
the
it's
response.
like
Look, we've simplified
disclaimer.
our agreement, and that's why we call it a branding and management agreement. So the branding part comes up front. Yeah, the brand standards, the intellectual property, the system issues and clauses, and that's really the core non-negotiable part, yeah? The rest is still a management agreement, and we have flexibility to negotiate that. But yeah, we are seeing an increase in franchising, and that's a model that perfectly works well for us. All we really want to be sure about is the core ability to operate. And we work well. We're seeing an influx of more independent management companies, particularly in Eastern Europe now. And I think, yeah, they do bring a lot of skill sets in particularly the emerging markets and the local knowledge that brings as well. So both models work, but I think at the end of the day, the management agreement is still a management agreement, and we need to be empowered, and we need to have that ability to perform on behalf of the owner in order to drive long-term value.
Yeah, never seen an ideal contract for both parties. So I think it's just every group tries to keep it kind of, keep some space for themselves to maneuver. But thank you for your question, or the comment question. If I may ask you, Max, and again, it's not an easy question, perhaps. With what's going on today between Russia and Ukraine, how are you dealing with selecting new locations when it comes to Central Eastern Europe? Are you still progressing as you would, or are you being more peculiar with some destinations than?
No, I don't think it has changed that much on a development side. What we're pursuing, we still have a long-term plan, and we're still trying to achieve those targets. Obviously, we have a big presence in Poland, and Poland is neighboring. But we're actually seeing. Well, I can tell you this year was probably the most progress we've done in Poland, the most deals we've signed, the most openings we've signed. And it hasn't had an impact on our pipeline or project pipeline at all, or change in the plans. Again, I think it's a difficulty more on the performance, seeing the higher energy prices that this is producing, but on a development side, we're still on track.
Okay, and would that be the same for you, Andrea, or for Choice Hotels?
I think so, yeah. I would agree.
Okay.
We've seen a lot of activity in CIS, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Georgia. It's relatively low volume compared to what Russia was for us. But a wider picture, we're certainly seeing a lot of activity in resorts, particularly coastal resorts, but also regional resorts. And a lot of that's in Greece and Cyprus. So much so that we took the decision to put some dedicated resource into this market. And we've got Andreas Kukas, who's our director for Greece and Cyprus now, based in Athens to drive that growth. Okay. So that's really where we've seen a lot of activity. Resorts has been pretty much stand out.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. I mean, we see that from kind of a brokerage agent side and as well. And I think, frankly, we've been asked to help with bringing operators on a lot more opportunities across the market than ever before. So it looks like people want to outsource the operations, but that is coming on the back of COVID rather than the war outbreak. It's just the hassle of handling hotel operations during COVID while you're not necessarily breathing and leaving hospitality day to day might not be an easy task. So Okay, well, perhaps we're having one or two final questions and 5 minutes for any other questions from the audience. And Nico, let me ask you, in your view, what are the crucial factors that hoteliers should consider if they want to add most value to their hoteliers being hotel owners, if they want to add most value to their concept today? Everything today.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Well, I'd have to say, I mean, the expert as far as concepts are concerned are, I mean, three ladies and gentlemen are actually right next to me. So, I mean, from an investor's perspective, my only concern would be to make sure that the concept that we bring to the hotel fits the location, the market, and today's demand. If I had to give my humble opinion actually on this, I would just say that maybe we should rely more than we used to on local clientele or domestic markets. So domestic markets basically for room revenue, and really local clientele maybe to drive more F&B revenue. We've seen especially in Prague, which was mainly driven by international demand, that some hotels have struggled, I mean, badly during the crisis. And we realized that some of these hotels were not generating any income with local clientele, and that's a major issue. And I think operators are doing very well at this. They managed to come up with concept that is now able to drive all that local clientele. And when you hit a crisis, that allows you maybe to secure maybe at least a 20-30% occupancy, drive a bit of F&B revenue, and cover some of your costs. In Prague, we were talking during the crisis about occupancy levels at 5 or 10%. So which is extremely low, and then of course your bottom line is badly in the red, and that's one thing that I think that operators have worked on, I mean, with quite a lot of success. So
yeah, I would agree. Operators have, and not just operators, but every other actor in our industry has really shown flexibility in what they do. I realized I made a huge mistake of not even introducing myself, and everyone's going to remember me as David Nutt. I'm actually a colleague of David Nutt, Magsud, based out of Prague, and I'm heading hotel transactions for the region. So little sidetrack from operators, but I see that on a day-to-day basis, and that's part of my job anyways. We have 5 minutes, so perhaps 1-2 questions from the audience. Yes?
My name is Živko Ivanov. I'm an asset manager of investment company. It's first to say it's really nice to hear in one sentence contracting with Hilton and flexibility.
That's a little irony.
Something new on the market. Anyhow, as the panel is how the big chains are going to lead the business in the future, and they are. So presently, there are way too many problems in our industry. The biggest one is, of course, the staffing. Apart from producing more and more brands, what are the new business models that the representatives of the chains are planning? And are you planning to put more technology? And what type of technology do you foresee?
If I may say that the group that Živko works for, they own a Hilton in Bulgaria, in one of the cities in Bulgaria. So
that's the comment.
There's kind of first-hand experience.
Yeah, I think from our side, you know, the digital journey and the investment there is where, you know, we've been innovating and where we've had a huge focus. So aside from, you know, the distribution and the e-commerce side, from the guest perspective, and Harold spoke this morning about the importance of being digital-led. You know, we introduced our digital key in 8 years ago, and you know, leading up to the pandemic, pre-pandemic, we had that in over 5,000 of our hotels globally, about 83% of the portfolio. So it was a real winner for the pandemic. Yeah, all this contactless principles really put us in good stead. So not only can you search, plan, book, choose your room, and get your digital key before arrival. You know, we've moved that on now to you can book connected rooms. We've got digital key share, and we're working on the connected room now. deploying that across the estate. So from your Hilton Honors app, you can literally do all these activities and order room service, control all the key functions in your room from your app. That still doesn't take away the personal interaction. We will always be an industry of people serving people, but the digital side of it is constantly being requested from our guests. And look, I've experienced it several times in the last few months. I stay at a major international airport. There's limited hotel choice there, so I won't tell you the airport or the brand, but arriving there, 1 o'clock in the morning, grabbing a connection, I've queued up over 20 minutes on 3 occasions. And that's where the technology really is going to smooth factors. So, we're continuing to innovate, we're continuing to invest in that side, but ultimately the human interaction will always be there.
Indeed it will. One last question? There is right behind.
My name is Theodor Kubak. I have a brief question with regards to contracting on 2 issues. One, undeniably, the pandemic has left some sort of impression on our contracting. And probably most of it, or some of it, has had an impact on the contracting, such as obligation to operate and force majeure. But looking forward and looking at the ESG and the EU taxonomy, could you kindly advise of what are your respective moves in order to fulfill the obligations which the owners might have with the SFDR, meaning the obligation to report on CO2 emissions and the contribution of the owners on a hotel level?
Who is the bravest? The bravest of you? It's less to you, I know.
I don't have my live guard with me.
Maybe, well, Mike has been the target for the past 2 questions. I don't know if Andrea or Max, you can...
I'm not sure I understood the question, to be honest.
Very
100%.
specific, and I think it... Yeah.
Sorry about this. Now, as we know, with the EU taxonomy, as of 2022 and 2023, all the owners have an obligation to report on, all those which have dues attached to capital structures, such as funds, such as banks, such as insurance and so forth. So all regulated businesses, most of the owners are regulated businesses, need to report on what is their contribution with regards to their investments. And I understand that even on a corporate level, when it comes to RFPs, many of the potential customers ask the head office, what is your CO2 footprint? And it's very, very difficult to report on these CO2 footprints. So the question which I'm having is, are these considerations, which I think is in the benefit of the various hotel brands, and you can set yourselves apart, or are they flowing into the contracts, or how? I know how difficult it is, so it might be somewhat provocative questions. What do we do in order to meet these demands for these capital structures? I believe it is a real, it's a real opportunity, considering that the energy prices are going up, considering that construction costs are going up, considering that financing is becoming more expensive, and considering the consumer demand that is looking for such ESG compliant products. So I would be interested in how and whether there's any consideration of having this incorporated in the contracts, whether it's management contracts, lease agreements, or franchise agreements.
Yeah, look, ESG is probably the most important issue, not only dominating our sector, but across all sectors. It clearly is here, and its importance continues to grow. Climate change is firmly with us. And we've been doing a lot in that space, and I won't say too much. Paulina Godfrey from our team is on the ESG panel tomorrow, so she'll bring you up to date on what we're doing at Hilton. We have had our Light Stay program as a corporate brand standard since 2014. And the importance of, Travel with Purpose is our ESG platform. And that continues to grow. We're seeing it from guests are demanding it, our employees are looking for a responsible employer, investors and owners are putting it front and center of RFPs. Our sales team have got inquiries that corporates are asking, what are you doing in this space? So it's fundamental. I think its importance will only continue to grow.
Yeah, I think ESG is a focus for all of us in general as an industry. But your question was specific about, are we bringing that into the contracts? I can tell you I haven't seen that yet, but I think it will get there.
So
I think we will at least have to have it in the brand standards, right?
Correct.
Like especially as a franchisor, you're dealing with a lot of different owner structures, different countries from Germany to Saudi Arabia. You cannot have the same requirements for Saudi Arabia as you have for Germany, maybe. That's why we're currently working also with an external consultancy to come up with a differentiated strategy for the sub-regions, and then to also obviously implement that into the brand standards and not just have it as a recommendation, because then, yeah, you cannot really control what's happening.
It's a matter of time, as I hear it. Thank you for the question, Theodore, and thank you very much for the discussion today. Max, Andrea, Mike, and Nicolas, thank you very much.
Thank you.